Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signs an anti-grooming bill. The German bishops are heretics, and people remember that the Oscars still exist. We'll cover that and more on today's Crisis Weekly Wrap-Up. Today is April 1st, 2022, and I'm Eric Sammons. First, I want to apologize for not having a wrap-up last week, but I was actually attending the consecration at the cathedral in my diocese with our Archbishop. And of course, that was big news last week, was that Pope Francis, along with many bishops, did perform an act of consecration of Russia, Ukraine, all of humanity, everything, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And there's a lot of debate about this, whether or not it was legitimate, whether or not what's the impact going to be, things like that. We've covered that some at Crisis, but what I'd really recommend is that you go to 1 Peter 5, our sister publication, 1 Peter 5. They have a lot of different articles about it, and I think that's probably the best place to go for that. And they're going to have some more articles, both for and against whether or not the consecration happened, I think, in the coming days. So again, go to 1 Peter 5 for more information about the consecration. One of the big news from this week, though, is that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed the so-called "Don't Say Gay" bill. Of course, that's not at all what it is. It's a parental protection, really, bill is what it is. For example, it states that schools are prohibited from having curriculum that mentions sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through third grade. First of all, if you want to talk about sex to kids that age, you're a groomer, and you should be arrested probably. You should definitely not be teaching in any school. It also prohibits school from discouraging or prohibiting parental notification and involvement in critical decisions affecting a student's mental, emotional, or physical well-being. What that means is basically if the staff at a school become aware of any major changes in a child's health or welfare, they have to tell the parents, which is obviously the best thing to do. And so really what this bill does in Florida is it protects parents. It allows parents to, again, be primary educators, the primary caregivers for their children. And the left just went crazy, which it's just interesting. Why is the left so obsessed with talking about sex to kids? I think it's something very disturbing. Today, actually, at Crisis Magazine, we had an article by Austin Ruse that talks about this issue, how important it is for the leftists to be able to talk to young children about sex and how disturbing that is. Also, I just want to note the stupidity of the left calling it the "Don't Say Gay" bill, because they actually believed, after a while, most of them actually believed that's what the bill actually said. I saw Hollywood celebrities and stuff talking about how can we have a bill in America that tells people what not to say, as if the bill actually said "Don't say gay." And of course, they say gay, gay, gay all over the place, thinking that they're now breaking the law or something. But that's not at all what the bill stated. So anyway, congrats and God bless Governor DeSantis for signing that bill. And Florida is just becoming the place to be, frankly, which is kind of funny. I used to live in Florida and didn't think it at the time, but that seems to be the place to go. In other news, Russia, Ukraine, still going on. The war is still going on, of course. I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we don't really know what's going on over there. There's been a lot in the news recently about the fact that Russia seems to be pulling back from Kiev, maybe, and they're maybe focused more on the eastern part of it. And how this is a defeat for Russia and how Putin's being misled by his generals. Honestly, I don't believe any of that. I don't necessarily believe the Russian propaganda either. I just think there's propaganda on both sides. And the fact is, what drives me somewhat crazy, though, is that the West, Putin will say something, say, here's what we want. The West will say, oh, here's what he really wants. Then when Putin gets what he wants, they say, see, he didn't get what he really wanted. But really, they were guessing on what he really wanted. The fact is that from the beginning, Russia's made clear that they want Ukraine to be a neutral country, and they want those eastern Donbass regions to be declared independent. And that's essentially what they want. And so there's nothing that they've been doing that really goes against that. Now, it might be true. Again, it might be true that they're suffering greater defeats than they expected. But I just think it seems like the Western media, the Western war propaganda is very much, it does two things, contradictory things. On the one hand, it says Putin is literally Hitler, this evil, awful dictator who wants to take over all of Europe and all the world. On the other hand, they say Putin's incompetent. He doesn't even know what's going on, and his generals are lying to him, and he's just we should have no respect for him whatsoever as a leader and like that. Well, it can't be both ways. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between those two. Also interesting is that Russia recently also declared that they're going to require unfriendly countries, i.e. those countries that have done sanctions against them, to pay for oil in rubles. And there's a whole system for this. It's not quite that basic, but essentially that's what they're doing, which of course that's a great idea from Russia's perspective, because the ruble, of course, took a hit when all this started. But if you're required to pay in rubles, well, then that's going to obviously bolster the ruble. So I think it's something that I think in America, we have a tendency to be so arrogant. The West is so arrogant that we just think if we say this, then everybody has to fall in line. Well, people are going to respond. Other countries are going to respond and they're going to react. For example, Russia doing this with the ruble and paying for oil. Plus, Russia just got into more agreements with China to draw closer to China. We have to stop thinking here in the West that we can just control, and especially in America, that we can just control the world and they'll just do whatever we want them to do if we're mean to them. They're going to react, and we have to take into consideration. Not necessarily we don't do things like this, but we have to understand the consequences. And I honestly don't think most of our leaders understand those consequences, how other countries will react. Another example is Hungary. They said that they're not going to buy U.S. oil because it's too expensive for them. They're a landlocked country, and they're like, no, it's going to be too expensive for them to buy American oil. So they're just going to continue to buy from Russia. Orban, the president or prime minister, sorry about that, of Hungary, he just said, I'm not supporting Russia, but my people need Russian oil to survive. And so we're not going to give that up because we have to survive. It doesn't help us any or hurt Russia any if we're destroyed. So we have to recognize these things and that's why I think negotiations and doing things like be more negotiating with Russia than just trying to virtue signal against them, I think is the better path. In Catholic news, the German bishops are at it again. I mean, I don't know what it is about Germany and being the root of heresy or something. Of course, we had Martin Luther centuries ago, and now we have the German Catholic bishops, which aren't even Catholic anymore. I almost said Karl Marx, Cardinal Marx. Maybe it's the same thing. He was interviewed recently, and this is in the Catholic World Report. He said, the catechism is not set in stone. One may also doubt what it says. And he's talking about this in the context of homosexuality. For some reason, you can guess as well as I can, the German bishops are obsessed with homosexuality. It's the most important thing to them is to get homosexual activity approved by the Catholic Church. And so here's Cardinal Marx saying the catechism is not set in stone. One may also doubt what it says. First of all, there's a problem here in the idea that the catechism is somehow the determiner of what Catholic doctrine is. It's not. It's simply stating what we've always believed. So you can change the catechism all you want. It doesn't change what Catholic doctrine is. But then he also said this. He goes, there are people living in intimate love relationship that is expressed sexually. He's talking about homosexuals, obviously. Are we really going to say that this is worthless? Yes, we're actually going to say it's worthless because it's a mortal sin. It's terrible. He says, sure, there are people who want to see sexuality limited to procreation, but what do they say to people who can't have children? I mean, honestly, think about this for a second. This sounds like something a seventh grader might ask. I mean, this is so basic. It doesn't take hardly any Catholic education to refute what Cardinal Marx is saying. And this is a man who was ordained a priest, went through seminary, ordained a priest, was a bishop, is now a cardinal of the Catholic Church and has been for years. He's risen to the highest ranks of the Catholic Church other than Pope, yet he asks these questions that would embarrass a seventh grader. Like, what do we say that people can have children? I mean, come on, this is basic Catholicism 101, that the act of the sexual act has to be open to procreation. It's not a matter of whether or not you're going to actually have babies or not, but a man and a woman, they are open to procreation. A man and a man never can be, or a woman and a woman never can be. This is basic stuff. And it's distressing. First of all, it's distressing that the Catholic bishops in Germany have gone so much off the deep end, but it's also distressing that nothing is being done about it at the Vatican. Whereas they want to clamp down on the traditional Latin Mass, they don't do anything about what's going on in Germany. I was very heartened, though, that Bishop Strickland, Joseph Strickland of Texas, he tweeted out, I think it was just yesterday, he said, Karl Marx has I said Karl again. Cardinal Marx has left the Catholic faith. He needs to be honest and officially resign. I mean, that is strong words. A bishop of the Catholic Church is accusing a cardinal of leaving the Catholic faith and needs to be honest and officially resign. He's absolutely right, of course. Strickland is absolutely right, and God bless him. But that's the kind of language we also need from the Vatican. They need to tell the German bishops, hey, what you're doing is heretical. Either get in line or go home, or you're going to be retired. You're going to be kicked out of the episcopate, frankly, for what they're doing. I mean, this is very destructive. Okay, let me move to some other news that's a little bit more pop culture and a little bit less Catholic, and that is what happened at the Oscars this week. And I think it's interesting because did most of us even know that the Oscars were still going on? I mean, after COVID and stuff, even before that, nobody really cared that much about the Oscars. They had terrible audience ratings and everything. But now, of course, everybody's talking about it this week. Why? Because during the ceremony, Chris Rock, a comedian, and he was up on stage. He made a joke about Will Smith, the famous actor, Will Smith's wife, who has experienced hair loss. And he made a joke about it. It was a dumb joke. It wasn't even that good of a joke. It was referencing a movie from the 1990s. It was mild, though. And Will Smith decided to walk up on stage and smack him. And then he went back to his seat and started yelling some obscenities at Chris Rock to stop talking about his wife. Now, it's interesting. On the one hand, I think one can appreciate a man defending his wife. If somebody insults my wife, I'm going to take action. I'm not just going to sit there. Now, I might not smack the guy, but I'm also going to defend my wife at the very least. And also, I would say, I think there's something to be said for the fact that if people understood that when they say nasty things about other people, they could be physically confronted. I think it would go a long way in stopping a lot of the crap that goes on in social media and in the world. I mean, think about it. If every time an anonymous Twitter account said something nasty about somebody, that person would know who they are and could smack them, I think there'd be a lot less nastiness on Twitter. Now, that being said, at the same time, Will Smith famously allows his wife to have sexual relations with other men. And so it's kind of hard to think of Will Smith as a defender of chivalry, as a defender of his wife when he allows this other stuff to go on. And so, frankly, I don't think Will Smith is going to be the example of chivalry and of manhood and of being a good and solid husband. I think, honestly, he probably, because he's in such an unnatural relationship with his wife, this so-called open relationship, I think it probably has a lot of psychological harm to him and demeans him. And so he might have just snapped. It might have been like this was the final straw, that when Chris Rock said this and he saw his wife was upset about it, he finally was like, I got to do something. I mean, he allows these terrible things to happen with his wife and does nothing. And then maybe he just snapped. Anyway, it was an interesting discussion. It of course, was big news for a week. It'll probably go out of the news pretty quickly. And I think as Catholics, one of the things we can say is, hey, if you live like a Catholic should, which is a monogamous marriage of man and woman for life, a lot of these problems aren't going to happen. And so I think that's really probably the lesson for all of this. In other news, this is just kind of a personal news. I was locked out of Twitter this week. What happened was I tweeted on Monday or Tuesday. I tweeted, just a reminder, homosexual activity is a sin, transgenderism is a mental illness, abortion is murder. Now, I knew of those three statements, one of them was most likely to get me in trouble with Twitter. And I'm sure Twitter didn't say what it was, but they say I violated the rules against hateful conduct because I may not promote violence against, threaten, or harass other people on the basis of their whole litany of woke identities. Now, of course, I didn't do anything of the kind. It's not violence against, it's not threatening or harassing to make these true factual statements. But the transgenderism is obviously the one that probably got me booted for saying transgenderism is a mental illness. But of course, obviously it is. Somebody who denies reality, a very clear reality, that's a definition of a mental illness. So anyway, I'll probably be back at some point. I haven't gotten around to deleting the tweet or anything like that, but eventually I'll be back. But it just shows, I think, that we have to always remember that big tech is not our friend. They are an enemy of the truth. They're an enemy of the Catholic faith. We have to be building up alternative ways to get the message out. Twitter, I mean, I also, like, for example, a liberal Catholic priest on Twitter was thanking Twitter for booting me off, because it's like, it's great. It's against hate speech. But of course, it's not going to stop with just saying something about transgenderism. It's going to eventually be, you say anything about the Catholic faith, then you're going to be kicked off. And so you're either going to have to subscribe to the woke agenda, or you're going to get kicked off. So we need to build up these alternative means of getting the message out. Finally, the last piece of news is there's rumors again that there's going to be a sequel to The Passion of the Christ, the movie by Mel Gibson that I think a lot of us will be watching pretty soon. A lot of us watch it on Good Friday, one of the biggest blockbusters ever in the history of film. And it was made almost 20 years ago now. Well, Jim Caviezel a couple years ago did say that they were doing a sequel to it, and Taylor Marshall did a video this week about it. And it does sound like there is a possibility. There is an IMDb page for this movie. It's called Passion of Christ Resurrection, and it's supposedly going to be out in 2024. Originally, it says it's going to be out in 2022, so we'll see about that. And so what's it going to be about? It could be about, of course, the 40 days after the resurrection to the ascension. That would be a very neat and tidy way to do it. Of course, we don't have a lot of information what happened during that time. Could be about the Acts of the Apostles, which we have a lot more information about that. But what I thought was interesting is what the IMDb page, which is not anything official, but I thought the way it described it was very interesting. It said, a sequel to The Passion of the Christ focuses on the events that occurred 3 days between the crucifixion and resurrection, when Jesus Christ ascended to Abraham's bosom to preach and resurrect Old Testament saints. Now, I just have to say, if Mel Gibson made a movie about that, that would be the greatest thing ever. You can see, wrong side. You can see the icon here I have, which is the harrowing of hell, the descent into Hades of Jesus Christ, where he goes down into Hades to the abode of the dead, and he brings out Adam and Eve and all the Old Testament prophets. That's my favorite icon right there. And if there was a movie made by Mel Gibson, oh my gosh. I mean, obviously it would have to be completely just based upon just different old writings and speculation, but it would just be awesome. So I'm praying for that. So we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if it'll actually happen. By the time they get around to doing it, Jim Caviezel might be too old to actually play Jesus Christ, but we'll see about that. Again, I'm rooting for the harrowing of hell, for him filming those 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection. But we'll have to see. Let's pray about that. Okay, everybody, that's it for this week. Until next time, everybody, God love you.